Oh, he's already got me laughing, but that puts him on the spot. I'm Dick Cavett. 20 years ago, kind of broadcast history was made when a New York City radio station aired George Carlin's well-known comedy bit, 7 words you can never use on television. The issue of whether or not the routine was too obscene for broadcast wound up in the Supreme Court. Well, since then, Mr. Carlin has kicked his drug habit, survived a string of heart attacks, or perhaps one, and has remained a preeminent comedy icon. What a thing to call anybody. He has a new album out, Jammin' in New York, and it is funny. It's as funny as any album he's ever made, which I think is about as good a testimony as anyone can get.
Thank you.
Monsieur Carlin, I am pleased to see you so well. String of heart attacks was a phrase put into my mouth there.
I had 3. I had a very minor one back in the 70s, which didn't seem to do any damage. 1982, I had a decent heart attack. I don't like these words, massive and mild. Every heart attack I read about is either massive or mild. Mine was a decent heart attack. Decent in proportion, had a little damage to the muscle, and then I had another one in 1991, which again just forced me to take about a month or so off. The doctor said if I can keep these to about once every 9 years, I can probably do all right.
It must be damn encouraging to people to hear you sitting here having had these. You know, speaking of censorship, you know what they wanted to cut out of a show I did once on PBS?
Yeah.
A show about heart attack. And in it was a thing that said, a man worried that he would not be able to have sex again, and this is a common fear in heart attack victims, was told by his doctor, you can have sex, but only with your wife. I don't want you getting excited.
Yes, right.
A Blue Nose thought that should come out, and I thought it should stay in, and it's a line that was not only encouraging to people, but...
Highest percentage of heart attacks during sex are with extramarital partners. Probably 70, 75%.
Added tension.
And added excitement.
Well, you would know. Self-appointed George Carlin experts, some of whom even write unreadable pieces in learned magazines analyzing comedy.
I must read that.
Refer to a soft period in your life, and one of these authorities said this coincided, interestingly enough, with his abandonment of drugs and alcohol, that this alleged soft period in your comedy, that is less pointed comedy, you will be relieved to know has passed, and that you are the opposite of soft again, apparently, according to this sage.
Yeah, those are observations, you know, that are superficial, and some things coincide that aren't related to one another. Life and art and entertainment and all of those things come and go in waves, you know? Everything is in waves. And I had a period after being the hot guy, the hot new guy on the block. You can't be the hot new guy on the block forever. When the heat dies down and you're not a novelty anymore, and you're sort of forced to look at what it is you do and extend it some. And I had the heart attack and a huge debt to the IRS, and my wife was also recovering from substance problems, alcoholism specifically, and it was a period of gathering strength and going inward and looking to see what the next step might be, and recovering, in a manner of speaking, from some of these things in life that come along. And then the work, once those things cleared, the work got strong again. Work got a little more pointed.
So there was no connection, really. There was not, maybe the gods must have something against me. Maybe I better make my act a little softer, or they'll be offended and smite me.
No. In fact, they were quite disappointed with the soft period, the gods.
The gods were, How do they make themselves known? Are they the ones who plant people in the audience who yell out things?
I get a pebble on the window every now and then. Just a pebble on the window.
Ooh, what a chilling image. With a tiny note attached.
Right.
I'm trying to recall, I don't think you went spiritual on us after your heart attack, did you?
No, I've always felt very connected to the universe without any religious overtone to it. I've always felt very safe in the universe. I feel safer in the universe than I do on this planet. And I don't mean physical safety. I just mean...
You have to clarify that for me.
The sense of comfort, the sense of being all right. I have always, something I devised for myself concerning this, existence. You look at this because other people write about it, you read it, and you're forced to think about it. And I discovered one day that I could say I am greater than the universe, lesser than the universe, and equal to the universe. And these are the proofs. I'm greater than the universe because I can think about it and contain it within my head. That's the universe. It's in here. I'm lesser than it because that's obvious. And I'm equal to it because all of the atoms in me are the atoms that make up the universe, the same atoms identically. So there I am, and what is to fear?
What's the punchline, George?
You got it. It's a long punchline.
It's funny because you're so interesting when you talk, and on stage you're so funny, and often the two don't go together. There are people who are hilariously funny on stage and impossible to talk to. Impossible. I don't know what that should be. I don't know why some lines out of a whole cluster of them stick in a person's head. Somewhere you said, why are hailstones always the size of something else? Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget it. When everything else has been wiped from my mind, I'll remember that.
Yeah.
And I love when you do word things like that, and your piece on euphemisms and
Thank you.
stuff like that.
Yeah, that is my great joy. My grandfather, who was a New York City policeman, and whom I didn't know, really, wrote out the works of Shakespeare longhand during his adult life just for the joy it gave him in savoring the language.
It's one of the sweetest things I've ever heard.
Isn't that lovely? And he passed that gift and that appreciation on to my mother, and I got it from her. And my father was very gifted public speaker. He won the Dale Carnegie National Public Speakers Contest in 1935. He beat out 800 contestants at the Waldorf Astoria. I have the gavel they gave him.
You're that man's son?
That's right, Pat Carlin.
I'll be damned. Is there a plaque?
No, there's just the engraving on the silver part of the gavel.
When we come back, I'd like to give you the chance to explode a myth for me.
Let's do it.
The myth is college audiences are the greatest.
Oh,
we'll be right back.
Good.
It probably is, yeah. Oh, I'm glad you joined us. When I was coming up as a comic in earlier days, college campuses were the thing to play. They were supposed to be the hippest audiences. They had nurtured the great Mort Saul and others and so on. And I was interested to read somewhere that you felt this is no longer true.
Well, I can only...
Am I exaggerating?
No, not really. I can only go by my experiences, and it's not a single judgment I wish to make.
But a blanket statement.
No, right, that's right. But it is true in most cases. I find college audiences for me, and this might be a function of mine now being 55, as opposed to being 30 when I was having much better success with them. Yeah. I don't fail in front of them, but I find that they can't keep up on certain things. I find them to be unworldly, which is unexpectable, I guess. And I find them to be not willing to take risks on ideas. When you want to go off onto something a little tangential that has some of this in it, they'll watch and listen and hope things are going to be okay, but they don't seem to participate. Yeah. This does change in urban eastern cities.
I've heard lecturers say they're just so damn uninformed.
That's a lot of it. Unworldly is part of it, and uninformed, and not willing to risk is the feeling I get from them.
Would it be putting you on the spot to think of a joke or an area that you thought would pay off in front of a college audience, or a reference that they didn't get, or...
I don't mind being put on the spot, but I'm not able to respond to it. I don't have the answer to it. No, but it has to do with filigree and delicate things and ideas that they don't maybe expect a comedian to deal with. Maybe they think everything should be whack, boom, whack, boom. And when you go a little bit like this, there's sort of a pulling back.
Somebody, I think it was James Agee, the critic years ago, said, most audiences don't catch Groucho's weirdest curves.
Yes.
They enjoy the moving around, and they get what you might call the lower level of his comedy, but the very finest stuff goes over a lot of people's heads.
Because they're geared one way.
I'm a dedicated enemy of political correctness.
Yeah.
And I heard someone say the other day, I reserve the right to be racist and sexist whenever and wherever I please. And some part of me responds to that because of what somebody's called the liberal fascism of you can't say this and you can't say that.
I have a routine I'm doing now. I will not use that phrase, politically correct, because it is a right-wing phrase applied to the people who believe in multiculturalism and sometimes go a little too far with it, okay? That's my way of describing it. I call them the politically sensitive language police. And I have a routine I'm developing on it. I worked Hofstra University last night, which, by the way, was not the way I just described most college audiences. It worked very well last night.
You can exempt Hofstra.
Yes. But it is true. My feeling is that I am more or less in sympathy with the motives of those people, but I am a First Amendment absolutist. And I think some of these are a stretch. People of color, if you're not willing to say colored people, you should not be willing to say people of color. People of color sounds like something you see when you've eaten too many mushrooms. I have an objection to Native American because it is a government-invented term. The Department of Interior invented the term Native American in 1970 as an inventory term to keep track of Hawaiians, Samoans, Melanesians, Polynesians, Micronesians, Eskimos, and Aleuts. They are all included in that term. And most Indians don't like the term.
Don't like the term. I have found that too. Yeah.
I think it's wonderful when people try to make everything black or white, and you stare there looking at the gray people, and you say, "What's this all about?"
Of course, we don't need to remind people that they are not natives of the Indies, but they have been Indians all our lives, and the American Indian movement is not the American Native American movement.
And India was not named India when Columbus sailed. It was called Hindustan, and he called them Indians because he said, "Una gente en Dios," a people in God. And it was this imperfect Spanish that he wrote in his journal.
It's funny how a phrase will suddenly strike you that you've seen all your life and you don't realize it's funny and ambiguous. Like void where prohibited. Now they say the patient voided this morning.
Yes.
So we're ordered to do that thing where we're not supposed to by that
Very
time.
good, very nice.
Where is it? It's Japan Airlines says, do not throw foreign, no, it's an American airline, American airline, do not throw foreign articles in the toilet.
I once saw a Volkswagen drivetrain in the toilet, and I knew someone had violated it.
Yeah. So I was about to throw an article from Svenska Dagbladet in the toilet, and I realized I couldn't, but I could throw one in from the New York Times.
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Domestic fine.
Have you got any new ones of those? I know you're always collecting them.
I wish you
and I know how
had
the
called
mind
me
goes blank on
20
a talk
minutes
show
before I
when you're
left the
asked to.
hotel, yes, and I could have made a little list in my mind on the way over. Maybe one will come to me in the middle of a sentence of yours.
I will do you the favor of not saying, what do you think about hecklers in nightclubs? Because there's no juice left in that question, except this perhaps. What motivates them? You and I are exhibitionists. We go on stage and we perform. It would never in a million years occur to me to yell out something during somebody else. First, my heart would pound.
Yeah.
I'd have audience fright.
The oddest thing is when they'll choose to do it. I work mostly theaters, and I don't get a lot of hecklers. I get people who are a little exuberant at first, and then they quiet down, and they listen. I ignore them at first, which helps, and then when I've finished ignoring them, I attack them head on, and I ask if someone in that section would please stab that person. You're responsible for your own sections. Please clean up that area quickly. That man is involved in theft of services. So I get right to the point. But
stabbing is to the point,
yes,
isn't it? Yeah.
What they do in the middle, let's say you've gone 20 minutes without a murmur from the audience except for the expected and hoped for laughter and the occasional applause, smattering perhaps. And suddenly, out of nowhere, in the middle of a thought, you have paused for, it's just a semicolon in your sentence.
Can you take that semicolon right now as an automated commercial is about to come in this second, and we'll be right back.
Yes,
semicolon.
we have automated commercials.
Talking with, I was afraid this would happen, George Carlin. And it was, if you had been here a moment ago, you'd have seen him making a gesture like this. I told him to do that because I really wanted to mention your other album, your other release.
Yes, I'll just jump right in. That was a semicolon, so I'll jump
yeah, then we'll
right
get back to our semicolon.
I'll tell you about the double album, the double CD, and get that out of my way, because this is a point of pride. It's not just pure commercial greed. There is a point of career pride here. My first 3 albums in the 1970s became gold albums. They were good sellers. They were called FM and AM, Class Clown, and Occupation Fool.
What's the minimum it has to be a gold album?
At that time, I believe it was $500,000 wholesale in value.
Okay.
And they've sold well ever since, although not at that pace, of course. The first 3 albums were called FM and AM, Class Clown, and Occupation Fool, and they contain a lot of the pieces that I hear most back from people, even these days, on a plane, in a restaurant, in a hotel lobby, when they want to make a connection. They say, oh, the 7 dirty words, or I was an Irish Catholic kid, too, I remember that. And this. So there are a lot of those pieces in it. The 3 albums have been released in complete form, nothing cut, on a double CD called Classic Gold.
Okay, so that's the one that might mistakenly be referred to as the best of Carlin.
And it isn't. There's
those
nothing
are always
left
irritating because they cut bits all over the place and you never know where you are.
And these are now my property, and I didn't want to cut them at all, and I talked Atlantic into releasing them as a double CD.
So the one I couldn't think of the name of, Jammin' in New York, does not have to, it should not be confused with that. You can get
that's
both.
New work. That's from the Madison Square Garden show in '92.
So a lucky person's Christmas stocking could contain 2 Carlins.
Could be bulging with humor.
Yep. Chock full of bops.
An awful thought.
Hey, George, does one of your, does this have the word warning on it, or is it the other one?
They all have the parental advisories on the front now. But the last album I made was called Parental Advisory.
Oh, here, explicit lyrics. Talk about euphemisms. Why don't they just say dirty lyrics?
I don't sing, but I don't sing at all on the album. Are they lyrics when they're just spoken in a lilting manner?
Well, unless some of your lyric poetry is in there.
That may be it.
What are they talking about
I love
here?
these words, explicit.
Explicit lyrics.
And graphic is another word. You hear them say, this contains something. People should look up in the dictionary the definition of graphic and explicit. They mean clear and concise, with no ambiguity. And why should we be warned against something clear and concise with no ambiguity?
Yeah, and if they're sincere about getting the warning across, they should say it in the most understandable terms that would reach the most people.
They should show the thing and say, if you don't like this, now look away.
That's right.
That would be the fairest.
Or full frontal nudity could much more easily be expressed by you can see there.
Great. You can just collect the phrases of an era and tell a lot about it.
Wouldn't more people understand the phrase, you can see guys' things, rather than full frontal nudity?
I think so. Yeah.
Boy.
Dork shots.
Takes a lot of nerve to say things on television. You remember years when we couldn't use that word?
And remember it? They're doing it.
Doing it, yeah. You know the British expression, and there were Hopkins and a chambermaid at it like knives.
Oh, that's lovely.
I'm not sure why that works when you think about it, but it does, doesn't it?
It does.
Certain phrases you shouldn't think about. But anyway, people are duly warned that your work may corrupt some sensitive members of the audience.
Anyone's open to corruption will probably have it happen.
You know, my only real argument with the religious right, I don't want to say that, my only one, but main one is they've produced so damn few good comedians. Can you think of any good religious
And the Ku Klux Klan produces very few great composers. Not a really great composer among them that I have noticed.
Yeah. A few good aerialists and one or two calligraphers, but not any...
calligraphy especially, you're right.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I went to a Klan meeting once.
Did you? Did you go as a news person, an outsider interested, or were you sort of undercover, you'll pardon the wonderful...
I don't know what it is about you that made me confess that, but I did. In Metairie.
Just continue. I'll come here twice a week if you see the need.
I sat next to a couple who had they were form-fitting, their hats, the pointed hats.
I had a line, you're going to like this. Let me tell you my Ed Sullivan story. The only censorship I ever had on Ed Sullivan, I did 11 of them.
Tell it.
I had 2 lines in this 7-minute or 6-minute routine. One of them was I said that Muhammad Ali was being punished because he wouldn't go off to kill people. He was a draft dodger, and he wasn't allowed to be champion anymore because he wouldn't kill people. And so therefore they wouldn't let him beat people up. Beating people up was his job. They wanted him to kill people. He says, I don't kill people, I just beat them up. They said, well, we're not going to let you beat them up. That was one line. The other one was...
Pardon me while I laugh.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh in your face.
Wallace was running, or had been running, and talking about pointy-headed intellectuals.
Yeah.
And I said something about pointy-headed intellectuals. Have you ever seen the shapes of those sheets those people down there wear? And they came to me after dress rehearsal and said, we will give you a choice of one of those 2 lines. That was the way the censorship went on that show. You can't say both of those things, but you may pick one of them and leave it in. Isn't that strange? Yeah, I chose the Muhammad Ali one. It was a much finer joke.
It's an interesting form of gutlessness, because what they're afraid of is that people would complain, and then when people do complain, they can say, well, we did cut something.
Yes.
It didn't matter what.
Right. Well, they wanted to halve the number of letters.
I had a 2-part show on pornography once, and the phrase oral genital sex occurred, and for those who might not hear it, it might sound like auto-genital or something. I said mouth on sex organs, and did the same thing when it came up in the second show in the mouth, so to speak, of a sociologist. They said you got to cut it from either Wednesday or Thursday's show.
It's so great. It's just wonderful that there's nothing. You know, they're really operating on nothing.
Do your friends who knew you when ever get into the, I suppose you're too good to have a drink with me now, you've gone so far?
Rarely there'll be a person and you quickly correct them. You know, I happen to be a person who's very comfortable with most human beings I come across. I don't have much trouble with anybody, no matter what their station or job in life.
You're a populist.
I guess so. I'm a Democrat with a small d, as they used to say. But I am very accessible to most people I meet. And so when you hear that, you think, gee, has this... I've had people who say, gee, we didn't want to call you. It's been like 10 years. We didn't want to call you. Why are you too busy, you know? And you think, gee, here's a guy who sat around 10 years and thought that of me and wouldn't act to find out if it was true.
Maybe tremblingly started to press
yeah, I'll got it to the third digit. No.
I'll confess something else to you now. You're like an analyst to me.
Wonderful.
I don't think I'm better than the people who accuse me of being too good to have a drink with them until they say that.
Yeah. Oh well.
And then I think, well,
in that one area, you have shown yourself to be better. Yeah.
Well, listen, Carlin, give me the best joke you ever heard in the next 20 seconds. You're on. Kick it, buddy.
Best joke I ever heard.
I don't believe I did that to you.
No, I can't believe you did either.
You like me up till now.
Can I write one down and mail it to you?
You make them back. Have your paper on my desk by Friday.
If I were a joke person, I would have one, but I'm sort of not. I just kind of like funny ideas.
And that's what some of us like about you.
Okay.
You're always welcome here, Carlin.
Thank you.
We'll bump anybody, particularly, well, we'll see you next time.
Thanks
so
a lot.
long.